This isn't really like a debate panel. This is more like a chill discussing relationships, sex, and having like a nice, comfy space to talk about the problems and the nice parts of all those things. So would you all like to present yourselves? So we can start like with the top left with Kaz or Car. Sorry, fuck. Hi. Yeah.
Immaculately.
Yes.
Cool. KataraNA?
You probably want to like skip me just for a second so that I can work on my technical things.
Okay,
Cool.
I'll go then. I'm Melon. I draw. I type in chat. I stream sometimes, enter random panels. Mostly do like emote art and different commission work like that. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm like a variety streamer. Though recently I've mostly covering politics and the Ukraine crisis. But I also like chatting about sex because sex is fun, and that's why we're here, amongst other things.
Is my mic picking up properly, or should I like sound suppress it?
It was cutting off a little bit when you're presenting yourself, but right now it sounds fine.
Oh, sure. Okay.
All right, and you, KataraNA?
Yeah. Hello. I'm Kat. And you could call me KataraNA, or you could call me Kat, or you could call me KataraNA, all up to you. I'm currently in Stuttgart. I will be in Berlin tomorrow. And
Uh-oh. The technical difficulties strike again.
Hold on. Yeah, sorry. It's just because I hit my camera. I'm just trying to like get this microphone to work so that every time I hit my camera, there's not a problem. But I'll be very still for a second. Yeah, I do variety stuff. Yesterday I was doing Duolingo. But I also sometimes do debates and sometimes I do panels. And last month I did a whole Black History Month assembly that Car was also a part of. And I also do like other stuff. So tomorrow we're gonna do a puzzle of the Berlin Wall after I take a picture of it. And yeah.
Oh, nice.
Very nice. Very nice.
Nice. That sounds awesome. All right, so I was thinking to like start the subject off, to like go around and ask. Oh, something I've been wondering about recently is when do you feel comfortable opening up about your kinks and like sexual needs in a relationship? Because I've seen some discussions online where people are like, you should be really upfront about them so no one wastes their time if they're not into like cucumbers, sticking a cucumber up your ass or whatever specifically you like. But on the other hand, there are many people who are going to feel like uncomfortable if you're too open. It's like too much information. They're not going to be. It might sabotage a relationship that otherwise could have been fine. So I'm curious, what are your approaches when entering a new relationship?
Ooh, I'm very straightforward, I suppose. I guess on my end, I always think that if they have a problem with it, that's their problem. Because like, what's the point of being in like something where you're there for like 6 months and then you're like, oh, I really like this one thing, and like that's something I particularly would need for long term, and they're like, I don't like that. Like, yeah, I guess it just doesn't. I just go like, I just talk about it like right away. Even before I usually end up being with the person, I'll tell them. And I also try to get them to tell me as well as soon as possible.
I think for me, it kind of depends. Like for certain things, it's very easy to be like, yeah, this is hot, this is nice, I like this is cool. But then other things, it's like, I'm not entirely sure if they would like that. So, and I don't think like there's like some kinks that are like you can kind of do, and others that like stay fantasy, you know? And like anything that I feel like I don't really think I want to explore, I just kind of avoid. But there's like a group that's like very easy to talk to, I guess. It just depends, and it kind of comes naturally to me. Like we just kind of when like talking to someone that like I want to be like in a relationship with or like sexual with. It's just like it just kind of comes up when like before like we have like sex or anything, like we're just talking. It's like because it's like a kind of like a fun conversation to have in some ways.
Yeah, I'd say that I agree with that. I'm a little bit older and in a established relationship now, so I'm fortunate in that it was kind of sort of a area of where we met to begin with. So the area of different kings is something that was sort of related to how we met already. So that was an easier conversation to have. But I would say, in dating, it's something that you should be able to naturally bring up early on in the
Hmm.
relationship. For many, maybe it's something that they're not comfortable broaching before their first time being intimate. But I think if it's somebody that they see any form of longevity with, then they should be comfortable bringing it up pretty early on, and that's definitely what I would do.
Yeah, I think I agree, especially with something that's happened. When I look back at my own history several times is like once when you're sort of like escalating the intimacy, uh, I've realized that talking about kinks is just really hot. Like you're maybe like cuddling with someone and you kind of know where it's going, and just taking like a little pause to share, like ask like what do they like, maybe share what you like. Not only will it make what happens later on better because you'll actually know what to do with the other person, but it tends to, in my experience, it tends to heat things up in a pleasant way.
Yeah, that's why it's pretty fun. Like I love discussing it. Plus, have you guys ever done like that? There's like a quiz online or something. It was like BDSM test or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like a fun one to do. And like just like sharing it with someone can be even if you're not gonna be like in a sexual relationship with, like just like with friends too, can be really fun. And I feel like I've definitely done that with my partner before. Um yeah, it's just like a fun thing to talk about. Like what they like can be surprising. It's like asking them about like their favorite type of foods, you know? Like even it's something that you're not really into, it can be like interesting to hear about. Like, oh god, they like pineapple pizza. Wow, that's crazy. No? It's
That's a
fun.
red flag, Melon. Come on.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I
That's
might
a
be freaky,
self-report.
but the pineapple pizza is just a bridge too far.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pure self-report.
No,
So
I would.
probably a little too late to bring up that I'm a huge pineapple pizza fan.
Where'd you find this person?
They're into some dark stuff if they're into that. Yeah, no, I think that
Gross.
it can be an exciting conversation to have, and there's
Mm-hmm.
different ways to approach it. It can be something that two people just sort of talk about privately and intimately. They say, "Hey, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of this? This is something that I like. Where do you stand on that?" And the most important thing I would say is to first of all, gauge people's comfort level at sort of every step of that. And also, because, I'm an anarchist, I always have to preach about anti colonialism, make sure to shed some of those colonial mindsets of what dating, gender, and relationships are all about. And it's a lot more freeing in that regard. And people, I think, can interact a lot more closely then.
That makes me wonder. What would you consider to be what are some like common behaviors that you would consider colonial in in
Cows and
relationships?
ass.
Well, so when I talk about, getting away from colonial mindsets within in gender and dating and sex and intimacy and things like that. So even though we're talking about kink, you want to get away from the idea of a rigid gender role having ownership or having dominance over another gender role and things like that. Because when you are able to sort of break that binary or break that social construct and the connection you have with another person, then you can talk about things like the switch, you can talk about things like submission, you can talk about things, whatever it might be that you're into, and you'll hear me struggling to keep myself monetization friendly. But basically, part of that is taking off those chains of what is formerly a society established role in relationships and gender and sex. And then that, I think, can open up the conversation even more. And it can come from strange places, like you ask your partner, hey, you like someone who maybe doesn't traditionally wear makeup with however they express, be like, hey, what do you think about wearing makeup? How do you think about wearing clothing for another gender? How do you think about things like restraint? Or how do you think about things like submission, changing power dynamics in an intimate setting? So these are things that are very rigidly constructed historically. And so I think that those constructs, once you break those away, it becomes a much more comfortable conversation.
As a switch, I 100% relate to what you're talking about. Yeah, definitely. Like to a certain extent, I feel like a lot of fantasies, if not all, always are centered around some form of transgression. And if there's something that's really harmless or perhaps even constructive to transgress, it would be those ingrained social norms.
Yeah, and as somebody pointed out here, it's if you take away the assumption of dominance and submission that society has pre-programmed, now it's something you can play with. Now it's something fluid that you can switch around back and forth because it's no longer assumed about however each individual in that relationship presents. Now it's something that has no set standard or no set position in the dynamic. It can be fluid, it can move around, and things like that. So that's why when I say shedding colonial mindsets, I'm saying let's get away from the assumptions of things like gender, get away from the assumptions of dominance and submission, get away from the assumption of roles and intimacy, and then they become something you can play with a lot more in a more fluid manner. If I'm making sense, that is. I tend to ramble, so let me know if I'm not making sense.
Do you think like people can like people that are generally like subs or people that are generally doms can be like switches, or like a dom could be like a sub? Do you think, or is it something that you just kind of are?
Well,
Like you can't really, like a dom can't really feel comfortable as a sub, or vice versa.
No, I
Like,
think you could do both. Like, it just kind of depends on like what's your mood for that day. Because, yeah, like I guess I would be considered a switch. It just really depends on the scenario, I suppose. Because, yeah, like sometimes I might just be more in the mindset of wanting to do one over the other. Like after having like a killer presentation and like, or I don't know, just being like an absolute like girl boss at work, you're like, yeah, yeah, I'm gonna dominate someone today. Like it kind of depends on like what mood are you in, I suppose.
yeah, it can ultimately just depend on what what they're comfortable being and at what time. So you'll find that people, that's why, however, we have terms like the one switch, because you'll find that there's people who are comfortable largely existing in one role, there's people who are comfortable largely existing in the opposite, and then there's people who feel comfortable being a little bit more fluid between the two and being able to switch, if you will, between the two. So that's why the term exists for people who, because a lot of people who are switches, they may primarily act as one or the other, but they can play around with the opposite. They can experiment with the opposite comfortably. And that's what it's all about. And yeah, sometimes it can be mood dependent, it can be day dependent. I mean, there's a great documentary that talked about a very popular dungeon in New York, and these people had customers that were like Fortune 500 CEOs. These were suit-clad men that command billions of dollars and armies of employees that answer to their every whim. And they want to go in there and get stuffed into dog kennels and smacked with newspapers and things like that because it's giving them something that they're not getting in their day-to-day life. Something that many people in the vanilla world might not assume they would want, but it's something that perhaps they were hungrier for than they realized. So, it's something to consider.
I suppose it's kind of like the idea of sexuality as a whole, because, there's some people that are 100% straight, there's people that are 100% gay, and then there's a lot of us that are upon the spectrum. So there's some people that like basically only want to dom, but I think the majority of us are able to switch from one to the other. Just some people are a lot more willing to be one or the other, and then the other one's gonna need, like, I don't know, a really good birthday present for them to go from one to the other, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you're talking about, it reminds me of also of an article I read a while ago about a sex worker who was working with those kinds of like Wall Street CEO, powerful white male profile people, and she had chosen to. The article was written because she basically was giving a condition on them. Not only was she femdom, she was also obliging them to read like anti-colonial, decolonial literature to seek her services, which was really interesting. Now, obviously, she was like a black sex worker, so
Yeah.
indirectly,
And that raises a great point that, so when you talk about POC, especially in North America, black people engaging in the space, so we walk a thin line where that fetishization can become harmful, right? Now, I'm not saying it can't exist, obviously, but the problem is that some of it is born from really, really ugly places historically. And so, and obviously this lady sounds pretty awesome. It's something that I loved reading about. I think it was written about in like New York Times or something. Like it got a big write
yeah.
up when it came out. So that's something that is a unique part of the experience that at least we encountered here. I can't speak to the dynamics of it in like France or throughout Europe. My brother lived in France for a while, so he I guess saw some elements of it. My brother-in-law, he played basketball in France, so tall black man from America living in France. So there's certainly some of that fetishization elements of it, even in Europe.
Nice. Where was he in France? If you don't mind
He
me
was
asking.
he was in Paris for a while. Yeah, he
Cool.
was in Paris. He played professional basketball in Europe, so they traveled all around Europe. I don't know how they do club teams over there, but I think they travel all throughout continental Europe and play. So you get a lot of traveling.
All right. Yeah. So, something we've touched upon with the pineapple stuff. Are there kinks
Oh.
that you are there kinks that you would just not want to engage with at all? I know everyone has their own limits, but that you would actually judge someone for having, or do you really adhere to like no kink shaming, no matter how hardcore they may be?
I think like those are two different questions. There's some that like I wouldn't do, like, but I wouldn't judge anybody for whatever their thing is, unless it's like explicitly illegal, I suppose. Yeah, like if your thing is I'm very interested in people under 18, like yeah, I'll shame you all day. But yeah, there's things myself that like I won't participate in, but anything that's like not hurting anyone, I don't care. I'll just have to say like, sorry, I'm not doing that. So yeah, so don't cut me. Don't like put any type of fecal matter near me, and like don't force blood out of anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I won't really judge anybody for like what they like, but I'll definitely avoid like certain things. Like there's a lot of things that I won't touch, but like if you like it, you like it. And it feels bad to judge people because I know someone that has like a pretty out there like fetish. It's not that it's just like most people would look at it and be like, that's weird, you know? And I'm not into it, but I feel bad because they have a insecurity now for the fact that people will judge them for something that they really like, you know? And it's something that they try to hide from themselves because they would get made fun of. And I guess like I feel for people that have these types of fetishes, um, and that they can't really control. You like the thing you like, and there's really not much you can do about not liking it. Because if this person was able to not like this thing, they definitely would because they feel shame about it, right? Um, so yeah, I definitely try not to judge people for like what they like.
I had like an ex of mine that was particularly like really into snuff related things, but like when I first met them, like that was like something that they told me pretty early, and they were also like staying with me, so I just like told my former roommates because I knew where I lived, and I was just like, if anything happens to me like this. But then like my former roommate, like every time afterwards when she would see him would be like, well, at least we're not into like no one here's into choking. And it wasn't until like maybe the fourth time she like had said it passively that he would like looked at me later. He's like, wait, what did she say? And I was like, oh my gosh, it took you that long for you to realize that? And it was like really, really
Oh,
Oh.
we lost Cat.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
I'm not allowed to move. Yeah, it was really, really awkward because I was like, yeah, sorry. Like I told my old roommate, but it was mostly just because you were at my place and I didn't know you that well, so I just like wanted to tell them to make sure I was safe. Um, I guess I kind of did judge that, but it was mostly just because like some of the stuff that they were looking at, I wasn't sure if it was like real or not. So I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, are you actually watching people die? That's not. That's kind of weird. Um, but
so
yeah,
snuff films or snuff stuff is like gore porn.
yeah,
It can be without. It can be dying without gore, though. If I understand
see.
correctly.
it's just like it's most the main part is just the asphyxiation part. So
I see.
yeah, so especially because it was like not on normal websites, it was like okay, I have to put on like I have to go on to different browser to like watch it. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of like that. I did judge that a bit, but I guess if it was on like Pornhub, I wouldn't have cared. But like if you have to go on like some other website to be able to use it, and you have to use a new
VPN.
browser, yeah, and a VPN, then I'm like, okay, are you just actually watching people die? That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like yeah, that was like, yeah, that was a bit fuzzy for me. I was a bit weirded out with that.
I've never. I don't think I've heard of that fetish. But that's interesting. Of
Yeah,
like I know about like morbid curiosity where people like to see like gruesome videos just like for curiosity's sake. Never like actual like get pleasure from it.
yeah, no, this was like exclusively what they would watch.
Well,
So I
Wow.
was just like,
and here's what I'll tell you to that. So, to an extent, that kind of gets very, very far into some niche corners of it, but you see some of it very much in the mainstream. So, think about for a second American horror movies, right? Think about the TV show American Horror Story. You're guaranteed, no matter what season of that you watch, or no matter what franchise of American horror films you watch, you're guaranteed to get two things. The quintessential ones, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. You're going to get brutal murders and objectified women, right? So, like, one of the very first scenes of something bad happening in the very first Nightmare on Elm Street is a half-naked woman running from a killer, right? So, and it's long established trope that psychologists have identified in American horror that, like, the slasher's murder is the punishment for sex happening on screen, because that's always the formula that happened. There was a sex scene, the people involved would get horribly murdered, right? And so coupling
Yeah.
murder and death with sexuality and things like that, it isn't as far off as people think it is, because you see echoes of it pop up in our media all the time. And maybe I think people like it more than they're willing to let on. But yes, one person in my chat said racks and razors. But I think to answer the original question, I try not to be judgmental. I say to each their own. Some things aren't my cup of tea. I kind of consider myself squarely in the dominant camp. So usually it's not so much things that I am being asked to have done to me. It's things I'm being asked to do to people. I guess a personal set of squicks that I have, the things that I kind of don't want any part of, is I tend to despise filth. So too much in the world of bodily functions I'm not really a big fan of. And well, blood doesn't off-put me too much, but believe it or not, the race play stuff is just a little bit off-putting, and that's one that comes up more often than you think. It's one thing if you're just like, your partner is someone of a different race, I have nothing against that. But if your partner of a different race is asking you to do something racially charged to them, like, getting white guys in your DMs saying, hey, can you bring your big black hands and dominate me with your bigger, stronger? They're like, okay, bye. No, thank you. And so it's, again, I'm a big fan of both safe, sane, and consensual. And the other sister of that is RAIC, risk accepted informed consent. And I think that's something that people don't talk about, is that, yes, ultimately we want everything to be safe, sane, and consensual, but there also needs to be the conceit that some things you do have a risk of you getting hurt, right? So if somebody's doing suspension, or if somebody is doing striking and wants to be smacked around and things like that, if somebody wants to be choked, beaten with a rattan cane, you accept that some elements of it are inherently unsafe, but that's why it's called risk accepted informed consent. So that's sort of where I am.
It sucks that there's a lot of minority groups in general have to face with a lot of fetishization of it. And yeah, they just have to kind of deal with that in their lives, and that kind of, I wish there was some way to like some type of push against that. There's been a lot of good push in media for representation of minority groups in media, but I don't see much push for to stop a lot of fetishizing when it comes to POC Asian people, like LGBT people as well.
I suppose that we would have to just generally get more comfortable about talking about sexuality as a whole to even get to over there,
Yeah.
because somebody shows a spare nip and it becomes rated R. So I think it's just
That's
a
fair.
lot of the weird Protestant culture that we have makes us basically, we don't even taught sex ed properly. Why are they gonna go and talk to us about why it's not okay to be oh my gosh, my Jezebel Nubian queen, no.
Yeah, and so the issue you have with that is that there's representation, and then there's areas where some improvement has been made, like on the LGBTQ front. as a lover of, not to go back to horror movies because they're very problematic, as a lover of horror movies, you see, for instance, an uncomfortable part of it is that there was a time where they loved making villains trans. They loved making the bad guy killer, bad
Yeah.
woman killer trans. And it was just, they're like, because it was their way of saying, well, look how weird this is. And this weird person's totally a killer because they're so strange. We've gotten away from that, thankfully, and all the trans panic nonsense. And so, and
They
we've gotten away from some of the uglier, older aspects of, like, oh, this is a big, scary black person. Be afraid of that. You know, we don't do that anymore either.
yeah.
But in terms of, like, you know, you mentioned fetishization of like Asian stereotypes and things like that. Part of that step has to part of that progress has to come from the fact that there's just not a lot. They're not letting a lot of them in the writers' room. And the same thing with black representation in movies, and we've talked about that on the last two panels. Is that, you know, there's not a lot of black people in the writers' room. There's even less Asian people in the writers' room. It's actually astounding if you watch just TV or movies in general and see how few Asian people you see in big budget films and media, right? It's really bad. So, and I would say that in terms of, if we start talking about kink, especially if POC are involved, you do have to, that's why I said earlier, you have to acknowledge that you kind of walk a little bit of a slippery line there, and you have to acknowledge that there's a bit of a history with certain minority groups behind some of these things. You know, we don't want to, it's one thing to have intimate partners who are trans, but you don't want to fetishize their transness as being something exotic. You don't want to fetishize someone who's Asian, their Asian heritage as being something that's fetishistic or something that's exotic and things like that. And that should be, you know, a conversation that anyone is comfortable having with someone that they're calling a partner, even if it's a partner just for one intimate session. It's something that they should be able to talk about. At least I think.
The only time I've ever seen, I guess, some of that explored was in a piece of media that was done by the group that was like a focus there. So there's a show on Hulu called Rami. It's about like an Egyptian family like living in America post 9/11. And yeah, at some point, like one of the characters, like a 25-year-old, like tries to like hook up with someone for the first time, and he keeps on like saying like weird stuff like, oh, like, can you wear a hijab for me? Like, call me like a white infidel and stuff. And she's like, yo,
Yikes.
what? Yeah, but that was like the first time I've ever seen that actually come up in a piece of media. So a lot of times, if you want to get into the exploration of these things, basically it's the people that are affected by it that need to do it, because you know it's like the whole situation that we were talking about in the last panel, where like it's otherwise it's just, you know, white people putting in just black characters to fill in for white people as a representation thing, rather than actually like trying to explore the experience.
Yeah,
So
it goes beyond representation because part of it is, you know, part of it is the uncomfortable white influence on media that's happened since its inception, at least in, you know, the Americas and things like that. It's all of those groups we talked about. It's about their position in relationship to whiteness. So they say that, well, whiteness is the norm. So, oh, this Asian person or this Egyptian person or this black person, they're exotic because white is the base standard, right? So we have to interrogate that, and that has to be interrogated in all aspects of this, not just kink. We talk about sex education, we talk about, you know, romantic partners, we talk about representation in movies and things like that. We have to flip the script on what is that default that we used to operate under and how to move away from that, because, you know, that's one of the ways that the colonial mindset and white supremacy still represents itself. And relationships in film and media is, what is the relationship to whiteness, which is considered the default. That's what people should keep in mind.
So we've mentioned like in the when it comes to well, I guess we're like talking about porn basically, stigmatization, inclusion of marginalized people in the in the writing and the design of it, and also representation. But I think there's one aspect too that we haven't discussed yet, is the systemic exploitative nature of mainstream porn, where it seems like to this day, despite some from time to time outrage for calling for regulation and such, a lot of mainstream porn institutions do seem to openly encourage and profit off the exploitation of people. I feel like that being the nature of those companies also probably influences this, where they're not going to stop and think like, oh, should we show this fetish in a decolonial way, when they're already built off of the exploitation and abuse of vulnerable people.
Yeah, and when you get into that, that's where you go up against the capitalist profit motive, is that it's hard for someone to find, well, if somebody's, if a studio's producing pornography, if we're talking about porn, major studios, their goal is always going to be leaning towards what's established, even if those stereotypes and that established element is problematic. And yeah, so that even extends to kinks, and I've always maintained that porn can be a very risky area to learn about these things, because not a lot of people, not a lot of people are doing these things, showing these things in a manner that I think could actually be learned from. It's almost always purely to titillate, purely for entertainment and things like that.
Yeah.
I think part of that's why I've tried to move away from the I guess more popular websites, because I just I guess I get kind of freaked out by like how much like either like barely legal stuff just is, I don't know, like I can't do it. And I don't like even seeing the word. And then also yeah, I'm not a big fan of all the like huge black man destroys like like tiny white women. Like I don't know. I don't
It's
want
okay.
anything
There's
to
a
do
lot
with
of
it.
incest these days too. It's kind of disturbing.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
no,
true.
it's step brother. It's different, okay?
It's like
But
incest, but they try to make it a little bit like, oh, if we add the step in front of it, it's
with a twist.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
websites
Both
won't
the
let them
twist.
say it explicitly, so they have to add that in so that their videos don't get taken down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's illegal in a lot of countries if they don't put the step in.
yeah, well, like as a result, I guess I've just been kind of like over it. And I think also it like had a lot of negative influence, I suppose, on like the way I started off, like knowing about sexuality. So now I try to use more of like websites that are either like directed and like run by women sites. So
sites would those be?
I've been using Belissa lately. I paid for it. It's like $3 a month, so I'm like,
Mhm.
whatever, sure, I'll do that. And yeah, like I just prefer that overall, because I guess I don't know everybody's personal like life in there, but apparently like they allow the people to choose who do they want to partner like with. And I guess it just feels like more ethical, I suppose. Also, everybody that's on there is like very clearly at least older than me, so that's cool, I suppose. Yeah, so I suppose especially after what was it, like last year, the year before, they had to take down like millions of videos off of the hub websites because of just like a lot of it was not actually checked, and it's like act like literal underage people on there. Like I don't know, it's gross, and I just don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah,
So
no, it's a nasty industry, and a few of the sites have taken a more proactive role to stop exploitation and things like that. And so, if we're talking about like adult entertainment, it's you have to ask yourself, first of all, should it be the burden on the studios and the actors, or should there be a movement centered around education on kink and BDSM and things like that? that is distinct from porn, that people can go to and say, okay, if you're interested, this is a source where its primary focus is to teach you. Its primary focus is not to entertain you and get you to sign up for a monthly subscription. It's different than OnlyFans or Pornhub or Spankfly or what have you. This is a place for you to learn about these things in an informative nature, because, they, unfortunately, even as accepted as a lot of it is, and even as easy as it is to find on these major websites, when you start talking about kink, it's still considered, they still use terms like taboo interchangeably to talk about it. And, they still treat it as that thing that's off in the distance, like, hey, we have it if you want to search for it, but we're not going to present that front and center, but it's here if you want it, right? So it's not something that's even yet part of the main conversation. Most, and honestly, the tide is shifting on that. Trust me, talk to youngsters long enough and you'll see that they're much freer in upcoming generations than, and I'm an old millennial, so definitely different than I was at their age, for sure.
The website that I was talking about also has I don't know if it's 24 hours a day or 12 hours a day, but you can like call in or chat with like an expert to ask about certain questions. And then they also do they have lessons and stuff that are done by doctors, I think. So I don't know, I think that's really helpful, especially if I was younger and I had questions about is this supposed to go like this, or what should I do to prepare for this? So yeah, they have full sex ed
That's
sections.
neat.
So yeah, I found it nice. So I think yeah, I suppose because otherwise yeah, I just kind of will have conversations when I was younger, and I would learn from older people that's not the way that's supposed to go. And because as far as I know, up until I don't know, 2 years ago, I was like, what? I thought my only purpose was to help the other person, and then I just go to sleep because I am just dummy robot designed to make sure man happy. Yeah, so yeah, there's I think the average website can really give some bad tips for people going in.
Yeah, for sure. It's not a good place to learn to learn sex from usually.
Yeah.
There's something I want to bounce off of earlier, and I guess it ties kind of into porn too. There is this author I really like called Anais Nin, who was famous at the start of the 20th century for or notorious rather for writing sex stories at a time where they were very harshly censored. And I bought like a compendium of some of her short stories, and when you were talking about the link between death and sex earlier, Car, it reminded me of the first story where the main character is a woman who goes to watch an execution in like 18th century France or something, and someone she doesn't know. It goes into some like non-consensual play, so I'll spare the details. But basically, someone engages with her in the middle of the crowd, and she orgasms as the guillotine cuts off the prisoner's head, which is a very weird thing if you think about it in like conventional terms. But it does bring to it brings to light this sort of strong tie that there is, I feel symbolically between death and sex, or even generally, if we look at in kind of like yin yang terms, death and life, sex being like symbolically kind of an act of life or of living.
Well, I think, that's definitely part of it. And I think if I had to explain it, and some of it's outside of my wheelhouse, and I'm a fairly dark individual in some of these things, but and things I'm into, but like, I would say the best way to explain maybe where it comes from is a sense of finality, right? So climaxing is building to a peak, right? So somebody expiring represents something that has no undo, right? It's you're watching something momentous happen that can't be undone. And so perhaps in that individual's mind who enjoys seeing that, they're watching something that has a heavy weight to it. It's very momentous. And so part of building to that peak for them is at that peak, something happening that can't be undone, something with a huge momentous weight, huge social stigma, a huge biological stigma. And perhaps that is where they derive that pleasure from viewing that. If I had to theorize, this is purely off the dome, though. This is just what I've thought about thinking about why people interact with something like that.
I think it's not an uncommon type of connection. I mean, I've seen like other types of situations like that in art as well. In the movie like Nymphomaniac, the main character's like dad finally like dies of cancer or Alzheimer's or something, and and narratively it's like, and at that moment what do you call it? I lubricated. I don't know. I think it's something for some reason that people keep on artistically making connections to. And I suppose, yeah, I guess there's something um, poetic, I guess, but about the link between life and death, and that might be the utility, and or people just really like watching people die.
People we do know love watching people die. So, regardless if
Yeah.
there's any sexual connection to it, we already know for a fact from most of human history that people enjoy watching that for whatever reason. Morbid curiosity, or just watching something that maybe we still don't entirely understand. So I would say that there being a fetishized element of it is not that much of a stretch. And I'd probably say it's more common than people think or are willing to admit.
Yeah. That reminds me of a story of back in ancient China, around like early BC, like 2000 BC or something like that. There was an emperor, like a really corrupt emperor and empress that would burn their subjects alive. They did a lot of crazy things like orgies in a lake filled with wine, but they would also like burn their subjects alive and they would find a lot of pleasure from that, like from seeing the people like burn. And that kind of reminds me of that. It's like wild.
Yeah, I feel though.
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, I need a moment. My camera's doing this face tracky thing, and it's very distracting.
Oh.
So I'm gonna turn that off.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask for the what it was, because I saw the like square popping up in front of your face.
Oh yeah, my camera does that too.
Yeah, but I feel like there's a difference though between like an individual's connection between death and sex, and then the whole power dynamic of like an empress, or like the like typical historical example would be the Marquis de Sade. Going into almost death cult territory with really gruesome acts. I wonder. Maybe it probably has the same root. If I was going to speculate, but I feel like the association of actually wielding power over other people adds a whole other dimension to it.
That's true, for sure. Like wanting to like crush something or like hurt something.
Yeah, even like the myth of the of like bathing in virgin's blood and all that kind of stuff. Like taking away the innocence of other people to somehow reestablish your own. It's almost vampiric.
I wonder if like other people that like for instance like seeing someone get their head like cut off, right, with a guillotine. In that way it's like watching someone like lose their power and like they have no control over their fate, you know? And that in and of itself, like someone like completely losing like full agency can be like pretty hot for them.
Yeah, maybe it's the extreme, an extreme of like a bondage situation where you lose agency over your movement, or
Sure. Yeah. Like
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different types of things that people find interesting that are basically just centered around different types of agency removals.
Mhm.
And I'm not entirely sure why that is. Um, but I guess it works for a lot of people because as long as there's the consent aspect that's added into it, where you just had the conversation about it, then I suppose it's fine. But I think that also probably leads into like other things as well. Sometimes, like for some people, I guess the consensual agency loss is not enough, and that's an issue. But I'm not really entirely sure, like if there's anything to be done about that.
yeah, as long as it's done safely and
yeah.
like consensual non-consent is a thing.
Mhm.
I imagine we're all okay with that.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
because it has my favorite word at the beginning.
Yeah, the most important one, the most
Yeah,
important word in any kind of sexual encounter.
exactly.
Sure.
This also reminded me, this is just a detail, but in the French language, orgasm has a colloquial term, la petite mort, the
Oh
little
yeah,
death.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Breath.
it's like the only thing I know in French.
Oh, nice.
That and like raspberries.
Nice.
Why
Oh
why
yeah, go ahead.
why does
Sorry.
it have that? Why is it called like
I
I
suppose you
think,
just kind of die for a bit. No, like
yeah,
part of your
it's like
soul comes out?
kind of, yeah, or you're no longer thinking, you're abandoned to the, you like kind of lose your agency too, to the pleasure.
Oh, I see.
Okay. Oh, that's it.
That's an interesting.
also a lot of times people like pass out right after, anyways. So
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah, the agency thing, I don't know. I don't know if I'm wrong in doing that, but I would kind of do the whole transgression reading of it, where or giving away your agency is like a transgression of your fundamental human condition, where you have agency over your own actions, your own decisions, your own existence, and it's then liberating to say have, for example, a partner tie you up
Testing.
by going
Hello, hello.
in this paradox of
Testing.
transgressing your agency, letting someone else take control
Testing.
over it.
Somebody.
I also
Tell me
suppose
how this
like
sounds.
a lot of that adds to I guess makes the situation intimate. I guess because yeah, it requires like a certain amount of trust for you to do that. I mean, it's okay. Like I might be
Testing.
willing to try a couple things with someone
We
that
have
like
socialist audio
I've meeting
issues.
recently, but I would never. I'm not really one for letting like a random person I'm just meeting be like, yeah, you could tie me up. I trust you to not kill me. Like I don't know. I suppose it I suppose a lot of what makes things more
Foxy.
intimate can be, I guess, the amount of trust it
Huh.
requires between you
That's
and the
an
other person.
odd critique.
I suppose a lot of times afterwards, like you can feel like a lot closer when you're doing
Muffled.
agency taking away
Better
things.
muffled.
Yeah, that's true. That
Super
makes sense.
quiet. Huh.
Par, you're on mute, by the way. I'm not sure if you knew. But...
No, I know. I'm also having microphone issues. I'm doing a little bit low, so I've been trying to zero it in with my chat here. I'm listening now.
I see.
You sound great to us though. You have a really nice voice.
Oh,
It's
I
very
know.
ASMR.
Thank you. Normally, though, it booms even louder, believe it or not. So I'm trying to figure out why. I'm not projecting as much as I normally do. Working
where were we? I guess bondage, or like agency.
Yeah. I also realized, like, even though for some of us it could seem really, I don't know, normal, that like asking another person to participate, and that can be often pretty hard. I think a lot of, especially, I guess, at least particularly for me, since I, have a female body, a lot of people feel very uncomfortable. For some, I guess, yeah, people can feel uncomfortable with certain things that
Oh,
perhaps on the surface might seem like they're hurting me or something. So if I ask someone to tie, like, a lot of times they're like, "Are you sure? Are you super sure? Are you really really sure? Okay, I don't want to do this." Like, whereas, yeah, I guess a lot of times, like, I suppose maybe men might feel a bit more comfortable asking like a woman to do it, and I don't know if that's true. I don't, but like in my experience, it's been pretty a bit hard, I suppose, to get people to do certain things because they're always really worried about, like, if this is hurting. I guess it's a lot of the, like, socialization of, like, you must protect women. Women are fragile. They're very weak, etc., etc.
Having had that feeling, at least on a surface level, I know it was more than just tying up. The tying up, I don't see an issue with that. But one of my first partners in life was someone who was like kind of into hard BDSM. She wanted me to strike her, to like softly choke her. Um, she was really into non-consensual, consensual non-consent. And especially given that it was one of my first partners, those were completely new things to me. And I was pretty much, it was very hard for me, and not from not from a perspective of she's fragile, but from a perspective of being educated to that violence against a person is bad. Even that I'd never been educated on the existence even of those kinks. It was my first time encountering someone who who actually wanted to have those kinds of interactions. So at least the way I experienced that reticence, it was really this. It was really just this idea of the difficulty of going against the education of you shouldn't hurt your partner. At least I didn't feel it as like them being a woman making them fragile, more just like them being a human being. I shouldn't be hurting them.
Okay.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was just gonna say that I would find it difficult to like slap my partner or something, even if it's like during sex. It would feel like something that, like, it would go against like a lot of like what I would want to do to them. It feels like I wouldn't want to hurt my partner, and like that idea would like make it a little bit difficult to like do that in like a sexual manner.
I suppose it's just like we do a lot of things during that we wouldn't normally do, like things that you would even like say. You wouldn't say that to the person outside. So I just suppose, like, I guess why one is easier to do than the other. Like, I've never had anyone like say, like, "You want me to say what to you? Oh no, but you're so adorable." Like, I don't know, but then yeah, if I say
testing. Okay,
put
there
a
we go.
like hand on my face, and you're like, "No." I don't. Yeah.
All right, everybody.
I guess
think
yeah.
I'm
I
coming
just
through now.
for me, it's like if you could do one, you could do the other.
Got my powered condenser
maybe.
mic
Hitting
instead.
feels a little bit different than like dirty talk, like calling them, because like dirty talk seems like a completely different beast. Like, because one like is like physical pain that they feel, and that, I don't know. In my head, it's like categorized like way differently. It's like
I'd say that they're different layers of role play. You don't necessarily, because some people like dirty talk that's kind of violent in nature or somewhat offensive outside of that setting. You know, some people like to be called names and denigrated and degraded, or put in a lower place by the things they're saying. So, it's just a different level of role play, whereas, whereas as opposed to something like striking someone, that's considered something that a lot of people call taboo or call kinky, because it's usually regarded as an attack. It's an affront to someone's physical autonomy. So obviously the things that you say to a partner in quote unquote dirty talk would be offensive to a stranger, and it's something that does break the social construct, but it's far more in the acceptable range than physical impact and things like that. How do I sound, by the way?
I'm good.
Sound fine.
All right, good. Sorry, leftists have terrible audio, so technical issues.
Oh, are you watching the Haas debate yesterday?
No. Was it pretty scuffed audio?
Yeah, basically the whole debate he was yelling, and Haas was yelling into his mic with the gain on blast.
Yeah.
No. The moderator was like just muting him because he was interrupting people constantly, and he was unmuting himself. So it was like,
wait. So was it in his own Discord? Is that how he was like unmuting himself?
I have no clue. I think it was a Zoom call or something, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just like a general meme that we all as leftists just have some of the most scuffed audio ever.
Yeah, which, I don't know what's happening to my USB mic, so I had to go and get my condenser powered mic. You guys can hear me just fine, and someone even went over and stream sniped Kat to hear how I sound, and they're like, you sound great there. No one on my end could hear me. So,
oh damn.
Yeah, so no. I was I wanted to fix that, because that's pretty much my only selling point is my deep voice. So, sorry, we were talking I'm bad at derailing conversations. Where were we?
Was a dirty talk? Oh yeah, I want to say I've actually had that experience. Personally, I enjoy like more degrading or harsh dirty talk, and I've had that experience where like I discussed with a partner, and they're like, no, I don't feel comfortable calling you those names or engaging in it like that. And then we try to find some kind of compromise, like things that they are comfortable with. But just to say, like I've actually had people say like the same way I was uncomfortable with like certain physical aspects. I've had people be uncomfortable with the name calling too.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that ever actually like a straight up deal breaker? I suppose, like. I guess for me, most of the time, eventually someone would warm up to whatever I'm asking. But is it possible for, that just to eventually be like, I guess I'm not getting all my needs fulfilled, and thus we're going to have to call this quits?
That's an interesting question. That's also one of the questions I want to ask. There's like, I feel, I don't know what the exact semantics of it would be, but maybe we can call it like a difference between a kink and a fetish, where like a kink is something you enjoy and can enjoy but don't need, whereas a fixation actually. Yeah, in French I think it's they use the word fixation. A fixation is something that you actually need in your sexual life. You can't pass on. If your partner cannot engage in it, then you're not going to be satisfied. I think it's different, right? No particular kink is going to be. Every kink can also be a fixation, but they aren't necessarily. For me, when it comes to the dirty talk, it's like a bonus. I don't need it to be there to be satisfied. So it's definitely not a deal breaker for me. What do you guys think about the? Like, have you had have you had partners have like deal breakers like that, or do you have deal breakers, or can you compromise on?
Well, I'd say everybody has, everybody has what we'd call hard limits, right? So some of them are a little more obvious and are a lot more common and easy to accommodate than others. Other things where it's something that someone is just very uncomfortable with it. You find a lot of those can be worked up to. If it's an actual partnership, then it's something that people have the patience and time to work that person up to. But I have heard of, some of people who have these things that can't be reconciled, and it is ultimately a deal breaker. But I guess the controversial take that I would have is within reason, and reason even of itself is a moving target. Within reason, someone who is a quote unquote romantic partner, what we're talking about is someone who's a romantic partner should have the ability to move to at least make a good effort to accommodate whatever their partner's into, and vice versa, right? Otherwise, there's other deeper issues with that relationship, because you're supposed to have some form of dedication to this person. So that means it's a person you put the effort in for, is the way I would put it. But yes, there are things that can absolutely be deal breakers. I mean, use an example. I don't like, dirty talk's one thing, but I don't like calling people mean names. I don't like calling people slut or whore. I feel immensely uncomfortable doing it, because part of it's just because I'm old and how I was raised, to not use language like that to describe femme presenting people. So, it's not a deal breaker. Maybe for some people it would be, but you get into heavier things, some people really might find that someone failing to take a more dominant role or take a more submissive role could be a deal breaker. But I'd say there was probably other issues present there beyond their kinks or their fetishes or their fixations.
You're good.
Oh, sorry, you could go.
You've talked less.
Well, I don't think I have anything for me that's a deal breaker. Like, there's nothing like, if this doesn't get done, I don't want to be in a relationship. But I do know my partner, I guess, had kind of like a deal breaker with like sub-dom stuff. Like she wanted to be domed, and I've never done that before, so it's like a learning experience, and it turned out to be pretty fun. But yeah, my partner definitely does have that, and so that was like my first, like, as someone, I'm pretty chill with like most, like, with anything. Yeah, so I feel like it's pretty common for people to have like their type of roles that they want to play in a relationship. Like if they don't get that, it might not be like a fun. I know, like every time I talk to people online, it's very much like they want, like, they're very hard sub or they're very hard dom. Um, and even people that like, well, there's some people that say they're switches, but they're still like, you could tell they're very sub. They're like super sub, and maybe like only sometimes they go the other way. Yeah.
For me, I've been with people that are like hardcore, like doms, and they don't do anything else.
Yeah.
And they're like really into BDSM, and if the partner was not okay with anything, it probably wouldn't work out. For me, people that don't make noise freak me out. Why are you quiet? Like, is your mom home? Like, what are we doing here? So, like, yeah, that's like a hard, like, no. Like, if the person, like, how do I know if I don't suck? Oh my God. I don't know. It gets
Oh
scary.
yeah, that's
Like,
true.
if you're just sitting there, just like, essentially, like, no, okay. So that's, yeah, it's just pretty, like, the person's like, I don't make sounds. I'm like, I don't want to be here. So I guess now we're both even. You don't need to make sounds, but I'm not here. Yeah.
Yeah, I need feedback too. It feels like I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, is this good? Is this bad? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I don't
it's.
like
Oh,
that.
sorry.
Continue.
I don't know if it's like male education, because typically, as far as I know, it's typically like male presenting people who don't vocalize as much, and it's something I forced myself to learn over the past few years to to like vocalize and I like moan when I feel pleasure. And what I've noticed is it actually increases your own pleasure too. It makes everything. It just makes everything better. I think that's a really base take, honestly.
Yeah.
The
Well,
vocalizing the.
I hate to be that guy, but as someone who's also had that conversation, for me, it's a neurodivergence thing, and that's a whole rabbit hole. Going into intimacy while having severe executive dysfunction and things like that. So, in the act, sometimes you really have to lock in and focus on what you're doing so that your mind doesn't drift and things like that. And part of that focus means you might just go very quiet. Right. So it's something, it's a struggle for some people who, in their particular brand of neurodivergence, that they have difficulty vocalizing. But yeah, it's, part of it does probably come from education. I think that, I don't know if it's a masculinity thing that you're taught to be afraid to make noise, or if it's just something that's influenced by culture and media of how we see things. I don't know. Just depends.
It could be like a masturbation thing too. The way you masturbate at home, you spend a lot of time doing it. That becomes kind of like the natural way you could like get released. There, like, for instance, there's like um
Holy shit, the good Morty. God damn. Glad your wisdom teeth are out. Thank you for the 20 in the super chat. Appreciate you. You're getting a big old pour.
They need like a certain type of stimulation, or like with men with their death grip. These types of things make it hard for them to like. They need like a special care, and other things too, like masturbating. You're not going to be really making sounds by yourself. I guess you'll be watching a video. It's very like disconnected, and having that intimate thing with another person can be really different. You bring back some of that stuff that you do by yourself, and you just want to feel the pleasure, and then you don't end up talking to your partners as much. And I think that could be like one issue.
That's a take on it I haven't heard that's actually really interesting. Haven't thought about that. But yeah, you're taking that with you and you're forgetting to use the language of intimacy when you're with another person.
Yeah. Would also like even outside of neurodivergence, one thing I've noticed, for example, is when some partners really like, outside of vocalizing pleasure, also vocalizing like talking about fantasies, or dirty talk, like, but dirty talk can more than just like words, but like talking about how you're feeling and such things. And as like certain sexual positions are really physical, and you're like out of breath or like concentrating on your movements, and you don't necessarily have the like energy or breath to actually say stuff. Is something I've noticed it can sometimes be hard to.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I think I'm very cis and male and mostly het, so I can speak just from my experience in that regard, that I think it's a lot of things that come together. But let me ask you this publicly, for anyone watching, and for you, or anyone who's mask presenting, or just anyone who's seen men in media or in public in general, how much do men actually express pleasure in anything? Think about it for a second. How often do you see a guy just like take a bite of a burger and be like, this is fucking amazing? We're afraid to just express enjoyment of anything, or any kind of emotional response. We really, really don't like it. Look how hard guys will try to not cry during movies that are sad or very moving, and it's something that we're just now getting away from. and that goes back to those very old traditional gender roles. So I think that you just, from my standpoint, guys my age, you can never have too much of an emotional reaction to any one thing, be it pleasure, certainly not pain. As you're just the emotional gangster, if you're experiencing sexual pleasure, you just stone face it the whole time and don't make any noise or change your facial expression. If you get stabbed, you don't change your facial expression, you don't cry, and you don't express pain. If you're sad, you don't cry and express grief or pain. And so you don't, if you're aroused, you're just like, hey, I'm aroused. You don't inflect any at all about that. And so that's something I could speak to towards, my generation. That's very true. Just guys are afraid to express that they're enjoying anything, so let alone sex. I can only imagine that they probably carry that with them, this fear to really let loose and let their enjoyment of something be vocal.
Well, I guess a lot of times, even if they do like express some of the more sexual feelings, it always has to be like in a really hyper mask way where it's like all growly and stuff. And I'm like, is there a reason why you're speaking like 12 octaves lower? Like,
yeah, baby. Oh yeah.
Yeah, like what are you like? What is this, like an Al Green song? Like, what are we doing?
Well,
I
that's
don't.
the hyper masculinity. You have to hulk out into hyper masculine mode. You got to become that caveman.
Yeah, like Grug wants puss. Like, I don't know. I don't know why.
It's programmed into us. That gets into those colonial mindsets and that toxic masculinity. It's things that we aren't able to shake, that we've been sort of programmed into, and you see it. All of you are lucky, because I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume all of you are younger than me on this panel. So you're lucky that we're getting away from that, because for those of us that saw the 90s, it was worse. Let me tell you, it was way worse.
Yeah, I suppose that like it is nice to at least I haven't even really had the issue too many times where I have to tell someone to be more responsive, and if I do, most of the time it's like, okay, yeah, I can do that, and then the end. But yeah, I don't know what I would do if like I just had to like spend time with the stone
Moose,
wall that's like
smoked meat and whiskey and tobacco is all
nothing,
great.
and then they basically just finish and they're like, now I sleep. Like that sounds absolutely miserable. Yeah, I so happy that I was just excreted in the 90s and not participating in the 90s.
Yeah, it's not a great place to be. It wasn't fun. There's Clintons and all kinds of shit. I mean, you would think we'd be a little bit more sexually liberated. The guy literally got a blowy in the White House, and we're still uptight as shit.
Yeah. But I feel like you've hit the nail on the head there too. Like with I don't know if I could, maybe that's a bit harsh, but I want to almost call it like masculine emotional stunting, where and the emotions are there, but there is this block for expressing them. I feel like that's really damaging for relationships in general. At least it's something I felt, and I felt the need to work on as an adult to wear down those blocks and express emotions. And at least in my experience, the worst part of it is that when you're so used to not expressing your emotions, and what you feel and what you want, there are moments when I look back at my life where I realize I wasn't even aware of what I wanted or what I felt about a situation. I was so out of touch with like my inner self that I couldn't even tell what I was actually feeling about a given thing.
Yeah, I suppose like a lot of that also can have something to do with neurodivergence, but yeah, I think in general, like a lot of mask presenting or like perceived people just generally like don't take enough time to evaluate like what they're feeling on any given day, and a lot of it is just I go to work, I try to make enough money so that I can pay for food for women or grab women. And yeah, basically it's like all about like how you're gonna, you know, get a roof over the
You know,
like
it's
for your
funny you
family
mention Young
and stuff. I
Thug,
don't know how
Moose.
you're gonna one day
Young
get a roof over
Thug
the house, the
is
head
more
over the
creative
family.
and talented than he has
It sounds
any business being.
yeah,
I
similar
was
to
always put off by the
Mr.
name and never listened to him, but I
like
watched the
what is it?
NPR Tiny Desk at Home concert that he did. Dude is a renaissance man. He is amazing.
Yeah, to just always have like a certain level of perform like I guess it seems like performance basically takes over your entire life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds. I know, like growing up, like in a Hispanic family, um, there's definitely like a lot of like toxicity, like masculine toxicity that um, where it's like showing like um, like crying or showing certain emotions is like frowned upon, and it sucks because like then you have like then you have like young boys that like feel a certain way, but they're not allowed to express it, and they don't know where else to like put that emotion. And some take it out in like very toxic ways through anger, through different like ways to like let go of all these things that they feel they can't express. And yeah, it's just it's super sucky. And it's not something that like it's it's hard to change because like there's a lot of push for like there's a lot of push against toxic masculinity, but then there's a lot in society where people still like that. Like you will still in social media and like in other movements, people are want like a push against social against like toxic masculinity, but in society, people still find that these interactions normally when they're talking to people where they get judged for being like emotional or feeling like certain ways. So it's like it's weird. It is strange.
Yeah.
their hang-ups on the subject of sexuality and gender roles, then they can get over their hang-ups on the subject of kink, and they can approach it from a much healthier place, same that they can do with, you know, sexual preference and things like hetero and things like that.
I do think like sexuality is more of like a spectrum than like a rigid like I'm straight, I'm not straight. So there's definitely people that are like mostly straight, but there's a little something else in there too.
I think it's very malleable, and I think it migrates. It can move around. I have been, here's the best way I can describe it, right? I live in the hood, so I know the manliest of manly men, all of the machismo and the bravado, just real big, mean, tough guys. But the one thing all of these guys have, they have that one male friend. They have that one guy that they're super close to, that person they would die for, that person they'd jump in front of a car for. And you see when they interact with that one person that they're actually able to drop a lot of that societal performance. They're actually able to drop a lot of that performative machismo and bravado. And so I'm just like, have they ever entertained the thought that they could connect with a man in that fashion? I don't think they have, but I bet you they could.
Yeah.
They don't want to acknowledge it themselves, but they have proven that they can have other forms of behavior.
Yeah, that's
I guess
hard.
unfortunately a lot of like people of color communities just were not like allowed to, I suppose. Like, I mean, I don't think it would go very well for the very masked guy like living in like certain areas to say like, hey guys, I'm bi, because everybody would be like, oh my god, you gay, what the fuck, you gay, like, so like, you just kind of have to keep it up at all times.
Yeah there's unfortunately and there's work to be done in the community. In a lot of areas, it's kind of sucks because, you know, the Black community on one hand was very pivotal in moving forward and the birth of the Pride movement. But on the other hand, you know, there are a lot of very strictly reinforced sexual and gender norms in the community as well that have to, you know, be progressed on. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of downward pressure on somebody to keep them from exploring that, let alone kink. And so, and while maybe someone might be open to the concept of domination and things like that, I think, you know, there could be people who actually would enjoy something like submission or things along those lines and denigration, but they have that mental block in there that they can't get past.
It's also pretty interesting, like on the subject of traditional roles and toxic masculinity, how the kinks really seem to always express themselves in relation to those.
Pan is a good way to be.
To those masculine concepts. Like either they go along them. So like the masculine person is the dominator, is the possessor, and etc. Or they're almost like reactionary. It's like they build themselves in opposition to those traditional roles. But yeah, it's also concerning the opening up to friends. This reminded me of a conversation I once had with someone from the Middle East. I don't remember which conversation, which country. Sorry. We were discussing how, like for example, my experience in France is that often my
oh, thank you, Real Salad. Welcome to the channel. Do appreciate you. Make sure to check out the YouTube. That's car_YZ on YouTube, or just look for car KAR.
I would even call them mostly superficial. Ever since a few years ago, I've actually decided to make myself vulnerable to my friends and see what happened. And I feel like that's...
You got it, Moose. They'll literally be Riley Freeman from Boondocks. Y'all niggas is gay.
That's so interesting. interestingly, they were sharing with me about their experience in a very traditional Muslim Middle Eastern country, where they in those kinds of interactions with women, you aren't friends with women in those countries. It's not allowed. So what they were describing was similar to what you're describing, Car, where they would have they would find this emotional fulfillment in friendships with other men.
Yeah, and I've seen it actually firsthand. So, because I love anecdotes, right? When I was a little bit younger, I used to love going to the to smoke hookah, and there was this Lebanese restaurant near where I lived that had really good food, but outside on the patio you could pay to smoke hookahs, and they'd bring you hookahs out. It was a nasty habit, don't pick it up, but you sit back and chill and smoke hookah. And I remember one day, me and my buds are out there, we're smoking hookah, and I think we'd ordered some, I don't know what we ordered, some shawarma and tzatziki on the side, and we're sitting outside there just chatting, BSing as we usually do, and we just see more and more people start showing up in vans. I think they were Jordanian, and I guess they had cleared out the rental room in the restaurant, and we just hear a big party start kicking off, and start small, and then that music's reaching a fever pitch, and I go to the bathroom, and I see, people dancing like they're having a big ball in there. People are really carrying on. And then as I'm coming back from the bathroom, it clicked for me for a second. I'm like, wait, it's all men. And then, I see, the men dancing together, and I see them carrying two men on their shoulders. And so I had to ask, one of the workers there, I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, oh, these men just got married. This is their reception. I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. And I'm like, I thought that was, haram, where they came from. And he's like, yeah, it is. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, damn. So, it's, and yet the sheer joy I saw on the faces of everybody in that room, and we're talking 50 people at least. It was packed in that little room. And, I think that was a level of freedom I don't see in too many places, even though these individuals probably, they may not get the warmest welcome back in their home countries or even in the communities where they resided here in the States. And we're talking about Ohio. There's nothing really remarkable about Ohio to begin with. So that was something that occurred to me. And yeah, that's part of that. You carry that masculine mask with you everywhere, and sometimes you carry it into the bedroom, and if you're not engaging with something that's heteronormative, then you've been conditioned instinctually to reject it, and then you apply that to yourself as well. You apply that standard, and so you basically you block yourself from things that you might potentially enjoy, things that might bring you satisfaction.
I remember at one point I was on a panel with somebody, and we went around and did introductions, and somebody introduced themselves and said that they were like in a polyamorous relationship, and they were pan, but also at one point they weren't doing either one of these things, and they used to be like quite conservatively Christian, but they realized eventually that they were just like basically saying that was wrong because it's something that they actually wanted to do themselves, and now that they've been able to do the things themselves, they're a lot happier. And I think, I guess a lot of times, I guess that tends to be a general problem, is we all have these societal pressures to do certain things. As someone that has a female body, I'm basically told that I should save myself for the one and have my one partner and have sex on my wedding day and I don't know, be barefoot and pregnant and stuff. And even though like anything I'm doing outside of that might make me happy, there's always like the general, I guess, kind of weight I feel at all times, just knowing that like I suppose that like if I were to some people would judge for this reason, and I suppose a lot of that just comes from like just there's a lot of societal pressure to do things in a certain order for some people, and yeah, like other genders can do what they want, but like women need to sit there and just shut up and like wait, or like yeah, you're just supposed to basically do missionary and you should have kids as soon as possible, etc., etc. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like a lot of pressure supposed to be under at all times.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, because like if you were to do it the way that you're supposed to do it, like it's not like you'd be particularly happier, but at least that like no one's judging you except for yourself, I suppose. But I guess there's always a competition between like whose judgment weighs the hardest. Is it like your own judgment or your local church's judgment? I don't know.
Yeah, it's there's all of the environmental factors play into it. What I wanted to say, since we talked about that topic a while, I think if we were going to talk about kink, I think it can't help but address, the question, because I think a lot of people deep down maybe are curious and don't know anything about it. I'd wanted to ask if it's okay if I can address the panel. What would your thought be if someone's curious and say, okay, I want to learn more, but I have no idea what this is about or where to start?
Mm.
So you mean for like a kink that we would be experienced with?
Well, what I'm saying is, I guess I'm speaking more generally. If everything someone's ever engaged with was heteronormative and purely vanilla, and they want to go outside of that, what would you say to them to where a good starting point would be for whatever their kink would be, something mainstream or something not mainstream? How would they go about exploring that? How would they go about broaching that to their partner? How would they go about seeking out, if they're single, seeking out partners in that, things like that? How would they augment their dating life to accommodate that?
I suppose for people that aren't single, I've heard that like it's just a conversation that you can perhaps have. For myself, whenever there's something I'm particularly interested in and this other person doesn't know much about it, I usually try to find like something that very well visualizes exactly what I'm interested in. And I would probably say like consider like watching this with your partner and seeing if they're like willing to explore this with you. But if you're single, a lot of times, if you like specifically look out for someone that's explicitly interested in or explicitly has experience with the thing that you're interested in, a lot of times they have experience with people that are new to it. So like I guess for myself, I'm a person that was specifically like a sadist, like sat there and spoke with me and said like, here are the words, let me know if there's anything too far, la la la. Like there was a lot of like conversation, like, are you sure? Like, like, okay, I'll start as like soft as possible. Is this okay? Is this okay? Okay, no, that's not okay. Okay, we'll stay between here and here type of thing. So I think it would probably be better, like if you're gonna try with someone that's not your partner, to just find someone that I suppose has more experience with that, because I suppose somebody that you're just hooking up with that doesn't have any experience with that is not going to give you like the care and like like walk through it with you like you probably deserve for a first time. I would expect like some guy at the club to be like able to really like, you know, walk with you through the fields about like how much water we need to drink before urination stuff happens. So yeah.
Yeah, when exploring kinks, you need someone that you could like trust for sure. Someone like, because it's depending on the kink you have, especially when it comes to like getting tied up or something. You can't really do it with someone that you're not really comfortable with. Like, who knows what they'll do to you, or like, it's some kinks can be very dangerous depending.
Yeah. Plus, yeah, and you need to be able to trust them that if you say the safe word, they'll stop right away. They want like something. Most people would probably stop, but it's something I've seen a lot. And for example, in stories of abuse, for example, is like passive aggressive abuse, being like shaming someone for stopping them, where it's like. That's really bad. You and especially for a first experience where you might not know what the boundaries should be. That would be horrifying to go through.
And I would think that the front door of it should be, you know, some kind of education resources. Part of what you want is to explain where the headspace should be of people participating in these acts, and also obviously then, in addition to training and safety regarding specific kinds of acts, but on top of all of that, you want to understand some of the no-go zones or red flags of this dynamic of these spaces. You know, people, unfortunately, as with any field of anything, there are people who are bad, and there are abusive people, and there are people with bad tendencies. So part of it definitely needs to be finding safe people who are trustworthy to practice with, and people who aren't abusers and things like that. And even more so than that, understanding all that goes into it beyond just the physical, because there's a mental aspect to it as well that I would say is even more important than whatever physical activities you're doing. And so that's why if someone's introduction, I think there's a distinction to be made between porn and demonstration, right? There's pornography that's sole purpose is to titillate and entertain and elicit pleasure, and then there's demonstration, which can be entertaining, but the sole purpose is to teach. And those are two different things. There are groups just about in every major city that do that education, so I'd say for anybody who is curious about that sort of thing to seek out those organizations. They usually have a pretty strong dedication to safety.
Yeah, but definitely something like, to go back to the question, it's definitely something that's going to be much harder for a single person to explore. But you point out though, the organizations, the groups, that's a good thing. Yeah, be able to get that basic the basic knowledge of what you should expect, what are the red flags, maybe like the technicals, like KataraNA was mentioned, like how much water you have to drink, or I don't know, for like bondage, how to tie the knots, what kind of safety measures you need to have, like a surgical scissor to be able to free someone right away if there's a problem, stuff like that. Sadly, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the stigmatization. This is the kind of conversations that I wish was okay to have with like your friends, for example, and without necessarily escalating it to making it sexual or intimate, but just be like, hey, I'm like into this. Anyone have tips or something? That I wish that was a bit more normalized in society, but unfortunately we're not there.
Well,
at least not in my circles, unfortunately.
With when I was here last time in Europe, and I was staying with one of my friends from high school, we were like having back and forth conversation about like sex and stuff, and like after I guess the week, they were like, oh, like I've been here like living in Germany for the last, I don't know, like 6 years, and I've never like had conversations with anybody about this kind of thing. And I was just like, that's kind of like sad, because for me, I was like, this was a pretty, like, it was even like a really intense conversation. But I guess just one, like, guys generally just don't speak to other guys about like sex, because essentially all it is like, yeah, I'm hitting it real good, homie. Okay, up top, up top. Like there's no further like conversation, I suppose. Whereas like when I was living with two other girls from a university, we would have like actual conversation about things. Um, and like that was nice, but I guess guys just don't really do that. Um, but also, you're saying that it might be harder for single people to get experience, and this all depends on people's different level of how private they like to be. But for myself, I just typically, if that's what I'm looking for at the moment, I just put it like explicitly in my Tinder bio. Like I'm just like looking for people that are more adventurous, specifically in this way. Like I'm either looking for like explicitly like a long-term thing, or you just hang out with me one time. Like there's like I just make it like clear. But not everybody's particularly interested in putting like looking for person to slap me in the face on there. Yeah.
Yeah, with what you're saying, like it kind of goes, at least in my personal experience. Obviously, it's a male experience. It goes back to the toxic masculinity too, where like I do have friends who are more open about their sex life, but then it's this very like almost misogynist approach of, yeah, I fucked this girl so good, like bragging about it, and without all the emotions, the intimacy, those like very human aspects of it, just this very like possessive, colonial, a colonial aspect to it, which is kind of sad. Where it's like we're almost there, where you're open about it, but it's you feel the need to frame it in this
I
toxic way.
dominated. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a bit unfortunate.
So what I would always say is you should just respond with no you didn't. Like she literally like she called me. No you didn't.
Just be like, I'd beat it up. No, not really. No. Nah.
She was literally playing Candy Crush the entire time. Like,
nah, fam.
Oh, well, that's a kink. The whole like your partner doesn't even care about what you're doing, and they're they're like playing Candy Crush the whole time.
This interest, that's a fun one, I guess. To each their own. We don't shame people, but that is. I guess I don't know if that's the one that you brag about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that like I have issues with too. Like some of my kinks, especially when it comes to for example more like polyamory or cuckolding type stuff. I personally really like those ideas, but they're so socially charged. Though like cuck being this insult that's used all across the internet. That's used in a way that's supposed to invalidate someone's masculinity. It's I definitely feel like it's very unfortunate that
what you talking about, Cammy? What you talking about?
More open about sex, more open about sexuality and gender and all those things. And so some of those I guess traditional aspects are really die hard. They aren't disappearing.
I guess it just depends on the crowd, I suppose, because I think like the crowd that will be super willing to go and like call everyone a bunch of cucks is not the same crowd that was going to be talking about like what their experience with it is. But I don't know, my prediction, and I'm waiting for it, is the day when eventually like it's saying like, okay, cuck becomes like the same thing as saying like that's gay, and then we can move on to something else, because like I'm pretty over it. But I just don't understand why there's so much like I don't have the pressure of being a male on my shoulders at all. I just don't really understand like how like all the different types of pressures and why does it matter so much like whether or not like you're like the complete alpha sigma alpha in bed at all times. Like, okay, like yeah, she made me wear a tutu. What's up? Like it was sick. Like, and what about it? Like, yeah. But I do know that there are like people that are into it and it makes them happy. Like yeah, but I'm sure the same people that are going around calling everybody like cucks, they're like, yeah, they probably like have their own thing too that people would like completely rag on them for. So I say we just go. I think we should like get people to infiltrate, sleep with those particular people, and then they go onto Twitter and just like out them, and then everyone will shut up.
Who wants to take that for the team?
Yeah, my chat got it. Don't worry about it.
Okay, yeah,
Nice.
good. Because the types of people who do that, I really feel like they're really, really shit in the sack. I don't think they would be, any of them would be good lays, as much as they consider themselves some like masculine sex Adonis. I think a lot of them are pretty pathetic. There's just too much posturing, and it really just makes me suspicious of them and their performance and their endowment. So I think those individuals, they've been taught to put, you were asking, where does that come from? It's part of what we're taught as men is to, you got to make sure that you're the conqueror and da-da-da-da-da. And yet the worst part about it is that none of them know jack all about actually being dominant and what all goes into that. And, what that means in terms of, interaction with your partner and meeting the needs of your partner. These guys wouldn't know anything about that. Certainly, most of them would I think fail miserably, even if they attempted or had the opportunity to encounter submissives in an intimate setting. Most of them, I think, would be a huge disappointment,
I'm wondering because I feel like we've talked a lot about the interactions between the kinks and toxic masculinity. Are there similar interactions in the femme experience that the like Mel and KataraNA you can think of? Maybe some kind of like societal programming that makes certain kinks or fantasies more taboo than others or hard to express.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if your mic was working.
I was just thinking. The only thing that I could think of is like
ball gags are so gauche. Just use the stockings.
Or being like open to sex. You can be judged pretty harshly for like engaging in sex with a lot of people. That guys would be like getting like pats in the back for it, like they expect like a very modest, like shy, submissive girl that will like save themselves for this one person,
Yeah, I suppose like in general for me there are like some things I'm interested in that like will require me to dress in a particular way, but I also feel generally pretty like I suppose there's this weird intersection between I guess like chastity or modesty and like intelligence, I suppose. So I'm always like generally I guess I'm very attached to the quality of being seen as an intelligent person. So guess it makes it kind of hard for me to like if I don't even feel comfortable like wearing like tight clothes. I will never like show both my legs and my arms at the same time. Yeah, it just kind of generally sucks. So I suppose that that sometimes like messes up some things I'm generally interested in because I don't know, something that I find interesting is like the idea of like wearing things that are like tighter and then just like being in public with like subway with like somebody that's my partner and but we're not sitting near each other and they just have to like see like how many people actually end up looking at me during the whole time. I don't notice. But if they notice, like, that would be interesting. But I wouldn't do it because I would also just be like, oh, everyone probably thinks like I'm a bimbo at the same time, and I think it's more important that everyone like thinks I'm a nuclear physicist rather than people think I'm attractive. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's very true.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that in the software industry too. There was this blog post by by femme software developer who was explaining that when she went to work, she wanted to present in a very feminine way, like corporate feminine. So like the dress and the skirt, but like makeup and all that stuff. And but within the software developer circles, what she noticed was that people, for example, when she went to a hacker convention, people would assume that she was, like you said, a dumb bimbo because she takes care of her looks, like the expected, and then she tried dressing, not putting on makeup, dressing like kind of more masculine. And then people respected her, the like hackers and the software developers. They respected her more as one of them, and which is kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess yeah, there's only like two things as what's from American Psycho when like all of them are sitting around a table and they're like, "What's a good personality?" It's just like, "Oh yeah, just like a hard body who shuts up and like is just submissive." It's like, what does it like? And they're like, "What does it even mean to have a good personality?" It's like, "Oh, it's something that only women that are like too ugly to like get a man through their face end up having to develop." So I suppose like I mean, that's like a super explicit way of like phrasing that, but like I've never seen somebody like I don't know, like see me in like shorts and be like, "Hey girl, you look like you could do some mad math equations right now." Like that's that's yeah, it's always kind of like yeah, the kind of commentary I get when I'm dressed one way versus the other way is yeah.
Like
it
you
makes
either
it
have to like be smart or like dress. Like if you're smart, you have to dress like very conservative. If you look like if you start to wearing like short shorts and stuff, it's like, oh well, I guess they're not smart anymore. I remember seeing like oh sorry. I remember seeing like this it was in I think like a movie called like Emperor's New Groove. I don't know. I saw like a clip of it, and it was like he was like looking for like a potential like date or something. I don't really know like the concept, the context, but he went up to one of the girls who's like I guess like ugly, and he was like, I guess you're the smart one, you know? And it's like stuff like that I see in.
Welcome to the world of microaggressions. Yeah, in that situation, that would make sense.
Like women are portrayed a lot of times. Like, oh, they have to like the smart ones, the intelligent, funny ones. They're only that way because they are, you know, they have to like make up for not being like attractive. When in reality, that is no way the case. You know, you could have like really intelligent, like smart, funny, sexy women, you know, attractive women that dress like how they want to dress.
Yeah, to be fair though, I feel like the stereotype is also, you also find it for men too, where like the jock is supposed to be dumb and just care about the gym and keeping their body in shape and looking good, and the smart people are the nerds who aren't in shape but they actually like take care of their mind.
I do
Yeah.
typically associate guys that are too buff with being idiots, but not really not a face thing though. I never I'm like, your face looks good, so you must be an idiot. It's just like, what, you spend like 5 hours at the gym every day? Like, when do you do your homework? So I just assume.
Like,
Yeah.
when do you have time to read a book when all it is eat, sleep, and lift, you know?
Yeah.
Which,
Like, are you...
Oh, sorry.
I've seen
No, I'm
both
just like,
sides of it, though, you know? I've seen both sides of it, because, you know, people tune in and see me here talking on the streams and stuff about these different topics, and like to think I'm at least semi-politically literate and, you know, in certain things and idpol and things like that. But at the same time, I played college football. So people will look at me and say, oh, well, this big brute, you know, that big Cro-Magnon man, you know, that bone crusher. And so that's the first thing that they see, you know, massive black dude, big, loud, booming voice. He's, well, yeah, he's a big hulk of a man, but it's like, no, you know, there's more to it. And yeah, we're conditioned. We are conditioned to address things at surface value. And that's something that that conditioning, we don't necessarily need people to turn it off, but we do need people to be cognizant of it so that they can take an active effort to look beyond it, is what I tell people.
Media plays a huge role in that, I think.
It does.
And it's like, people are not entirely aware of it. Like, you'll watch a movie without that in mind, but it still leaves an impression in your head. Like, when you watch a movie where it's like, all the jocks are like big and strong, you're like, oh, nerds, you know? That's gonna leave an impression of like, oh, how people would view like a masculine guy versus like a skinny guy with glasses, you know? Or like, yeah, like media is really influential in a lot of ways, and people don't really pay attention to that, even though it affects them greatly, I think.
I think the trick is to hang up a book above your face when on leg day. So sit down at the machine and just hold the book in front of yourself, and you let your legs do the work.
Yeah, on the treadmill, I'm just sitting there and listening to Carl Sagan.
Yeah, put on that Audible, you know?
Yeah. Audible's the future.
Listen. If you can, they need to just understand that the kinkiest thing is someone's brain. Give people brain boners and take it way farther. So that should be, honestly, that should be the best advice to anyone, both in dating and partnerships and kink and everything, is that you connect on that mental level before you do anything else.
And that is actually so true too. Like, even like once the connection is there, and there's like a basis of attraction. Something I've noticed is that being able to express your express like erotic ideas in more original ways than just like KataraNA was saying, the K1nk puss. Like being able to be like eloquent and sexy and erotic in like more stimulating, more intellectual ways is I've never met someone who did not enjoy that. Like trying to like put in thought to your sexting and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think in general, like somebody that's doesn't seem particularly intelligent can make me be like, your face is cool, but like I don't even know if I could do this. Like, yeah, like second, like somebody starts like telling me about like, I think there's something in the vaccines, and like, never mind. You can go home.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually an interesting one too. Would y'all? I guess that's going off topic though, but I find it an interesting question. Could you date someone who had different political opinions than your own?
Depends on how bad these opinions are, really. There's some things you can forgive, right? Like someone with a little bit more conservative economic ideas, or more radical like like economic ideas, but like certain social issues, like I don't think I would be okay with that, especially ones that affect me. And depending on who they support, can also kind of like give you like an indicator of like what they would like what they believe or fall for, you know? Let's say someone that listens to like Rush Limbaugh, right? You know this person is not someone that like can discern between like actual um, good information and misinformation. And then that can definitely be a problem. But yeah, I think it really just depends. Because there's a lot of like things that I don't agree with that I would be okay with being like being in a relationship with this person. But,
I used to like date someone that was really like pro Modi, and they were able to
Ooh.
slip. They were really they were able to slip past me because like I didn't know enough about them, like what like the Indian political scene was, but essentially like now I know that was like essentially Hindu nationalism. Like if you're Muslim, you don't belong in India and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess if I knew what I knew now, I probably would not have dated that person. Um, and I suppose I don't. I think I'm a little bit rigid with it because even like people that are just like establishment Democrats get on my nerves. Um, so I think like yeah, I'm not sure how much like people that are like I don't know. I've spent time around people's family where like their family were like, man, like I'm so tired of all these taxes. Like I don't understand why people can't just pay for their own university. And I'm already like, I don't like it here. Can I go home? So yeah, I don't think I could really date someone too far off of my own political
I
spectrum.
like being able to like argue with someone, you know? Like if having something to disagree with and like have a discussion of it, even if we don't like entirely agree, is fun. The only problem is when it comes to a realm where there's no way that they will ever see any other opinion than they have. And that's when it's like can be boring. But I love like having to like discuss that, and having a partner that has like some disagreements can be pretty fun, I think.
Yeah, I think some disagreements can be fun, but there's just like some where I'm like, this isn't fun
Yeah, for sure.
anymore. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, like if once they start asking me like, why is it that the blacks are paid less and they don't seem to get out of their neighborhoods? I'm like, I don't like this.
yeah. There's certain
I
things
don't
that,
want
like,
to be
okay.
here. Yeah, I think that, well, it's different for me because I am, a little bit slightly politically misaligned with my partner, and it's someone I've been with for 10 years. But what I'll say is two things. First of all, I met them when I was much more apolitical and less politically involved. And B, I would say that, yeah, there's a limit. You absolutely can. But I think that at a certain point, someone's political difference gets into the realm of reactionary. And if someone is reactionary or bigoted, then no, that's something you can't really reconcile with, Yeah, having a partner is one thing. If someone who's previously supported a Republican candidate at one point, that's not the end of the world. But if it's somebody who believes that Republican candidate's views on, non-cis heteronormativity, or if that's someone who believes in their views on like immigration and things like that, that's where you get that disconnect from. And that's where I would draw the line, is I guess with like outright reactionary stances or outright bigoted stances. Because at the end of the day, I do subscribe to the belief no one's born leftist. No one is born communist or anarchist. And right now I am still bound to encounter, especially if it's people my age, they received a public school education that was extremely pro-capitalist and extremely pro-Western, and definitely leaned, I'd say, center-right, had a definite center-right slant on the majority of the education. So I think that I see it as an opportunity, and like you said, like Mellon said, what's the point of being in a relationship if you don't have someone to argue with? There's nothing more kinky and arousing than a good fight, after all. I mean, that's the reason for our whole discussion, isn't it?
I thought that's why we all had Twitch accounts, was because we liked arguing and we just go and cuddle our partners afterwards.
Well, I was going to say, you can't bang your Twitch viewers or the people, your debate.
You can't. I'm kidding. No.
Your debate opponents' Twitch viewers. I mean, I don't think you would want to. You argue it with like anti-Coomer Nazis. So like, these people are weird.
Yeah, they're also like a bunch of bones as well. Like, my God. Yeah, no, I'm good. Like, yeah.
So I remembered I tuned into one of those debates. What a
you find the weird ones. You find the live ones for sure.
Yeah. But then I get to go to sleep, and I'm like, man, I have been all argued out. Now I can just go and take a nap.
Yeah, I was thinking about it too, because so a while ago I stumbled upon this old newspaper clipping from like the 30s, which is really weird to read. It was a story of a married couple in New York where the husband was originally German and supported the Nazi Party, and the wife was Jewish. And the article was like, oh, they argue about it, but they're still together.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, yeah. And also, 2 weeks ago, I went to cover an anti-vax rally here in Paris with for the stream, and I interviewed someone where it was it's kind of a similar situation where I was asking him about his opinions, why he didn't want to get vaccinated, etc. And he shared that his wife was vaccinated and that they actually disagreed about the dangers of the vaccine and all that stuff. It was I didn't want to press them too far into like personal questions, but it was interesting to. I imagine it's probably something like what you were describing, Car, where maybe they met where at a point where they weren't necessarily politicized in such ways, and it's not enough to break their relationship or their everything they've committed to each other, right?
We don't always pick who we love, is the sad truth. Now you can pick who you keep in your life, obviously, and who you keep physically around you, but sometimes you have that connection with somebody and it's hard to go against. So you just I think really that ultimately depends on the person. I really can't judge anyone beyond what is there. That's, to me, that comes off as strictly interpersonal. I can't judge any one person for their choice in partner. Even if some people do have partners that are like intensely reactionary, I'm all like, well, I don't like your spouse. They're a garbage human being. But, can I tell you you're wrong for being with that person? I don't know if I would go as far as that statement, but they are most certainly wrong. And you should absolutely tell them that they're wrong. And, that's where the end of it is, I think. So it's the anti-vaxxer and the vaccinated husband is an interesting one. I haven't heard that one. There's a popular political commentator named James Cargill here in the United States, and his wife is a lifelong Republican of 50 years, and he is decidedly not. He is known for being fairly left-leaning. So that's another very well-known example.
I don't personally get it very much, I suppose. I mean, I guess it's just because all of these sound like they're such personal things that I don't know if I could really have worked that out. But I guess some people are so kind of blasé about politics. So even though they're generally really they would vote for everything that's left leaning on the ballots, they don't care throughout the year.
The majority of people are blasé on politics. That's kind of why we do what we do, is because most people are uninformed on a lot of these things. And so they're strictly operating off of what's presented to them, within the two, speaking from a U.S. perspective, two-party system. Most of them, that's the beginning and end of their knowledge of political parties. And if they happen to be privileged enough to where the ongoings on Capitol Hill and in the White House don't have a day-to-day effect on their daily life, for better or for worse, as was me for a certain period of time, they can go for years without really thinking all too hard about the politicians. And yeah, they'll see news articles about things that are like what's happening in Texas. And, if they're not trans, if they're cis hetero, it doesn't really strike a chord with them. It doesn't ring in their head that, hey, I should think about this. So they are, because they're uninvolved and because they're not really connected to it. So I think if you do have somebody who's put that energy into being involved politically, it ultimately becomes a personal line of theirs where they would draw the line on who their romantic partner would be. But that varies person to person, I assume.
I just could never, even let's say for the other situation where it's like somebody that was part of the Nazi party married somebody that was Jewish, I guess, even if I was able to change their mind, I never want to be like, oh, I hated all of them until I met you, and I just don't want to, I don't know. I don't know if I really am interested in that level of pressure. Yeah. It's even when I meet people that have never interacted with another Black person before me, I always feel like it's a lot of pressure, where people are like, oh, I only saw you guys on TV, so you're basically the guinea pig right now. I'm like,
yeah, I usually make myself scarce if I hear they're the first Black person I've really hung out with and talked to. Okay. Yeah, when's the bus get here? Just that's always been a little odd for me. That's always been a little bit frightening. But yeah, no. The example of the Jewish woman and the guy in the Nazi party, I'm not really sure how that shook out. That's weird.
That is a story I would love to dig into. I want to research that. If you have the people's names.
No, I think it was a New York Times clipping from the 30s, like I said.
Oh.
So one thing to keep in mind, it's also before the genocidal aspect of it, even though before World War II. Mm-hmm. So maybe that played a part in them being able to have a relationship. That being said, yeah, I don't know if I can find it again, but I'll look it up and see if I can send you a link.
Okay.
I wonder how well that went afterwards.
Yeah. Awkward.
Yeah.
On a vaccine note, my girlfriend's parents are in that situation where the dad is vaccinated and the mom is anti-vax. So pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's and their relationship's still strong. It's just a little thing that they have to deal with where they're trying to convince her to get vaccinated. Even though she doesn't want to. I think they're finally making ground and she might actually do it. With the new Novavax, I think, coming out.
Oh, there's a new vaccine. I've been trying to catch them all, so I got to go get that one too.
This one apparently uses moth larvae for their vaccine. They inject I forgot what it was. They create the mRNA into moths, and they create the specific proteins that the moths try to fight it. They try to fight this disease, and then the scientists take that from them and inject it into humans, so that the body could protect itself. It's the specific, I forgot what it was.
An antibody?
The spike protein. The specific spike protein.
Goodness,
yeah. It incubates inside the cells of the caterpillars, and then they take that and they put it inside of a human. And
I think that's going to be the one that like makes you level up. That sounds like a level up kind of action.
Yeah, be honest, Kat. Science is just shenanigans. Isn't it just people just like throwing shit around and just doing whatever? Like,
The good
No,
thing
do
about
they just
Iowa-
my science is math.
do they just pretend to know what they're doing? No, I know your science is you do astrophysics, or what do you do? Do you blow stuff up?
I do rocket science and semiconductors.
Right. So, like, yeah, there's a lot of math to it, but at the end of the day, you got to shove a guy in a rocket and cross your fingers that it works. You know?
Well, there's only a 10% failure rate, so
Exactly.
he gets a real good life insurance policy, then there's no problems.
Exactly. So it's even with all of the math, if we talk about NASA and things like that, it was they'll tell you they knew what they were doing. No, they're just shooting dudes and strapped to rockets into space. They did a lot of the math to get close and narrow down that failure rate, but it's still there. And yeah, so I did want to say to the assembled panel, or Namimannen, I think I said that right. Hold on. Namimannen. Sorry, I should have practiced it. Namimannen. Thank you for having me. I will have to depart here soon, but
all right.
Didn't know if you had any other subjects to touch on.
It's fine. We've been like almost 2.5 hours. Like that's roughly usually where we ended. Yeah, it was a pleasure to have you on. Really nice meeting you.
Very nice to meet everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Once again, so check out Car's channel.
Yes, on YouTube. Car on YouTube, KAR. Not the gun channel that reviews car arms 98s. Keep going, and you keep scrolling, you'll find me. And I talk about anarchy, political commentary, and most recently I did a video essay on international sporting events and how they're bad for your city, and you should protest them if your city wants to host them. Olympics, World Cup, it's bad stuff. You should check out the video. It's really good. That's me, though. Nice. I am Car. I make music too.
Oh, cool.
What do you play?
I don't play an instrument. My computer's an instrument. I make electronic music. So.
Oh, cool.
Trance, dubstep, ambient electronica, things like that.
Is it on your YouTube channel?
Yes, some of it is. I also am in an artist collective called Shared Records. There's also a link on my YouTube channel to that, where I submit Creative Commons songs for other content creators to use freely in their content as they like. And every one of my videos uses a new original music made by myself.
If you do ! intro on my channel, and you click on the link that's there, it'll lead to his YouTube channel with his music.
Thank you.
No problem.
Quick question: Can I like listen to your music on stream?
Go right ahead.
Would you allow me to check it out?
Awesome. Yeah, I will. You know what? And we're on Discord, and I have a general rule of thumb to begin with that other content creators, I give them access to the whole greater catalog anyway, so I'll send you some SoundCloud links, and you can have at it. Doesn't bother me at all.
Awesome. That's super nice.
That's cool.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for having me. I will depart. I appreciate having the chance to speak on these, and I made it 2.5 hours without getting demonetized on YouTube, so we navigated that minefield together. Thank you, everybody. Pat yourselves on the back. All right. Take care.
See ya.
Hey, everyone. Well, that was fun, right? I think we're all having a good time. So make sure, because I see you all looking ready to click away. Don't do that yet. Make sure, if you haven't, you click like on the stream. Make sure, if you're not already, you click subscribe. Those of you watching on Twitch, go over to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because that's where you find the good stuff, right? And yeah, I'm glad everybody got to come out. I really appreciate you watching. I got to have another music chill stream here soon. There's so much madness going on right now that I think everybody could use a little bit of chill. So, thanks for tuning in. Audio issues aside, it is appreciated. You all have a good night, okay? And not